All right, so the theme for today's lifting and yapping session will be why I don't worry about back pain from lifting, as I go through a little bit of a clean and jerk session. But this was actually one of the video requests that we received in my suggestion box the other day, so thank you to Jack Tickner for suggesting this amazing topic. All right, so just warming up with my number one back loosener upper, which is Jefferson curls, light Jefferson curls, supersetted with back bends. All right, so one of the first things we should probably cover is how the thinking about the cause of pain and injury, especially to the back, has changed. So we used to think that if you were doing dangerous movements like deadlifts or anything where you're loading the skeleton, you had to be really particular about the way that you moved your spine when it was under load. Well, generally speaking, people were told to avoid movement under load when it comes to the spine at all costs. And so a lot of the thinking was centered around the mechanism of spinal flexion, so bending your spine this way, leading to disc herniations, and that leading to debilitating back pain or huge injury episodes and things like that. And there's been two key developments in our way of thinking about this over time as we've learnt more about the back and pain and injury. And this is that first, pretty much every single tissue in your body is adaptable. So even if something is potentially injurious, as long as we control the dose and we're intelligent about our progression, we can make each part of our body more resilient to the stresses that we may place upon it. So it's not that flexing your spine under load is bad, it's just that sometimes people find themselves flexing their spine or moving their spine in any direction under a load that they hadn't adequately prepared for. So as long as you're working up to weights and progressing things intelligently, and we call this load management, you should be pretty safe. Not only have we started to understand that any movement could be good or bad depending on the context and your level of preparation for that said movement, one of the other lines of thinking that's developed a lot in the last couple of decades is the association between structural damage and then pain or injury, or especially pain, because I guess structural damage by definition is some type of injury. And so I think this began either in the late 80s or the early 90s, and a lot of these studies were either done in Italy or France. It was when the emergence of MRI scans became really, really popular. If you went to the doctor or the physio and you're complaining about severe back pain, they'd book you in for a scan and look for some signs of structural damage to help you explain your injury or your pain. And yeah, they found that all these people who had crippling back pain, they had all these spinal degeneration, disc herniations, all sorts of structural damage to their spine. But then they started doing MRIs on people who didn't report any back pain, and they found the same thing. It was just all sorts of structural damage anywhere, so there was no real pattern between structural damage to the spine and then any sort of reports about pain or impediments to their life. And this isn't to say that structural damage can't be the cause of your pain, but we've just got too many studies showing all these people with just obliterated spines, complete degeneration, and they seem to have a really high quality of life. They seem to engage with exercise, not report too much pain or anything abnormal. And when we really started to zoom out and be like, okay, so if it's not just structural damage, what are the factors that we can associate with people who have a high incidence in more chronic or more severe back pain? Is it their lifting? Is it their lifestyle? Is it the way they move? And honestly, the biggest correlation that was found between back pain and anything in the population was just your age. As you get older, there is just a higher incidence of chronic back pain. And this doesn't mean that, I'm not trying to make people feel bad, but I think one of the things that has changed in terms of our attitudes around pain, especially back injury, is not blaming people for their back pain or their back injuries. I think a lot of people used to feel a lot of guilt when they hurt their back. It's like, oh, I've done something wrong, I've been an idiot. Whereas it's like, back pain is a normal part of life. That doesn't mean we just accept it and give up when it comes to back pain getting in the way of us doing things that we want. But it just means, actually I've ranted for too long. I need to get into my clean and jerk warm up, and then I'll talk about how our changing attitudes towards pain and injury have made us reflect on our training practices and the things we say about that. Okay, so let's start to unpack some of the concepts that have changed our thinking about the association between structural damage and pain. So the oldest scientific explanation for pain, injury, or any sort of health issue with the body is that we were primarily concerned with the insult to the physical structures, and we didn't have much regard for anything else in the equation. But then that narrative really hit a wall, especially, with the emergence of all these MRI findings. Like, why do all these people with insane structural damage and degeneration to their spine not have all this pain that we would expect them to have based on our structural explanation of what causes pain? There was a framework that was developed by George Engel in the 1970s. He sort of theorized the biopsychosocial model, and this was a departure from purely biomedical thinking. It's just based on this idea in medicine that, yeah, no matter what's going on with our physical body, the human experience, it's so much more than that, and it's so much more complex than just our structures. Wherever we go, we also bring our thoughts, beliefs, expectations, our social interactions. All of these affect our life experience, and pain at the end of the day is just another form of life experience. So again, just to repeat that, pain is not a byproduct purely of physical structures being damaged. It's a byproduct of all these environmental factors that at a certain point might reach a threshold that causes us to have a pain experience. But this could be, like I said, from structural damage, your age, the amount of stress you're going through, whether that's work stress or what's going on with your training program. And all of these things go into the same bucket and can cause, I guess, overload. So this is leading to thinking about things like dynamic systems theory, thinking about pain as an emergent phenomenon from an environment that had a series of factors that may have all contributed to it in some way. So a lot more complex, I guess, in like our understanding of pain, but it's definitely moved us away from these narratives of like, oh, you just blew your back out because you did deadlifts and they're bad for you. And you're a bad person because you don't know how to keep your back straight when you're deadlifting. It's, again, we're much more sympathetic that you haven't necessarily done something wrong just because you're in pain. And it's not just because you've damaged these structures. There could be so many other factors. And I'll give you some examples that'll sort of highlight the practicality of a lot of this stuff and how it can be really comforting to think of things in this way, especially when you have had an episode of back pain from lifting. Here's the thing about back pain, and certain other structures as well can fall into this category when they get injured. People have a very different attitude when either themselves or someone they know is going through an episode of back pain or back injury versus like ankle pain or an ankle injury. And again, a lot of the explanation for this starts to make more sense when you're looking at it through a biopsychosocial lens. So not just thinking about damage to structures or the health of the physical structures, but thinking about the total environment that the person's in and everything that they might be experiencing leading up to that and at that present time. And some of you might find this example really hyperbolic, but it does illustrate the point that we are these biopsychosocial or allostatic creatures. Okay, so imagine you're in the gym deadlifting one day and you feel really bad twinge of back pain and you just can't go on with your session, your back completely locks up, and then all of a sudden you're on the floor. And again, we're not even going to talk about what structurally might be going on with your back at that given time, but let's say hypothetically your father or one of your parents had a very physical job, but they lost their ability to work because they developed some sort of chronic back injury at some point in their life, and it interfered with their ability to provide for their family, engage with tasks that they love participating in. So not only is it like the insult of the injury and the pain, but it's all the trickle-down effects and all the way it affects your life in so many different and meaningful ways that are so different on a person-to-person basis and so individualized. And that's sort of where the attitudes are changing when it comes to back pain. It's what was the activity that you were doing that potentially caused the back pain? Like, is that a meaningful activity, something that you actually want to work your way back into, even if it is a non-linear and a little bit of a rough journey, working your way back up to deadlifting? Or is deadlifting not actually that meaningful to you and you'd be happy to never do it again if it didn't affect your life in any other way? Some of the other examples, other than your own value system in terms of engaging with meaningful activities, people also sort of talking about everyone else's personal relationship with pain. Some people don't want to experience much pain to have to engage with activities in their life. There are other people where there are activities that are so meaningful to them, they don't actually care if they're experiencing tremendous amount of pains. Maybe they just want to know that they're not doing further damage to their body. And this has been another really comforting takeaway from a lot of these developments in our thinking about pain and injury, is that just because something you're doing might be causing you a bit of pain, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing further damage. Now, obviously this is a little bit complicated and we're always like hypothesizing these things and there is a little bit of guesswork involved, but yeah, it is something to be considered. Just because you're experiencing pain, you don't know that you're doing damage to your body. I mean, think about all the pain that people exploring kink activities and stuff like that. Like, you know, we all know deep down that pain isn't always strictly a bad thing. And again, sort of just The general theme of this moving forward is we're acknowledging complexity, individual value systems, and moving away from purely structural narratives around pain and injury. And how good is that? My tripod's sitting right in front of me and I had to make a choice about that rep. I'll just take a smaller jump on my next one. I'm just gonna repeat that. We're making intelligent training choices today and then I'll move on to some pulls. Now let's talk about what do you do if you have pulled up sore and you think you might have hurt your back from lifting. Well, the first thing I would say is to not freak out and just to do a little bit of a self-assessment, like how concerned are you about the pain? Because the first thing that's most important is that we clear off any red flags. So if you're starting to become incontinent, if you're starting to get like radiating symptoms, it's not localized and it's really referring all the way down your leg, that's absolutely a good reason to go to a physiotherapist and just get yourself cleared for red flags, because from time to time, these things can be serious. But outside of that, back pain has a really favorable natural history, which basically means that a lot of these things will get better on their own, especially if you eliminate the activities that are currently pissing it off a little bit, or if you just regress them a little bit to the point where they're not making your symptoms go above whatever threshold you've deemed acceptable. So you might already be thinking to yourself, if it really just is about, giving your body the time, the space, and the environment to heal, what the hell is the role of physios when it comes to rehabbing your back injuries and things like that? Well, I'd say that they still fill a very important role when it comes to clearing people for red flags and those more serious forms of spinal injury, which do occur from time to time. But where they're still really, really helpful is not everyone is capable of maintaining confidence through that healing period and coming up with solutions to help them stay active. And we talk about this term, meeting people where they're at. So physiotherapists, they can help you almost in the sense that they can be this load management specialist. They'll clear you for red flags, they'll fill you with confidence on this journey, and they should come up with a bespoke program to get you back to the activities that will be meaningful to you over time. At least that's what the good physios are doing. All right, let's slap this 110. Got to remember to take a few breaths before I go and breathe into the mic and trigger Dave. Shout out Dave Haggerty, one of my best clients. But we're moving on to some clean panda pulls that are around my clean and jerk goal. Familiarize the CNS. Okay, so with panda pulls, we're just going to do sets of 3, and I just want to see we keep the timing and the rhythm nice, try to get that feeling of weightlessness above the hips, see if we can get the bar to levitate for a moment. We're just trying to get it to about belly button height and just feel the timing and the rhythm of a heavy clean. The way I sort of coach panda pulls to people, it's like the pump fake. So you pretend you're about to do a clean, you pretend you're about to do a snatch. I would have liked to get a bit more weight on the bar, but that's definitely not going in my belly button, so let's hang here. But definitely I'll reef it a bit harder on the next set. I'll throw my belt on. We bounced around to a lot of different topics within our topic of trying to explain why I'm not too worried about back pain from lifting. So I guess the things I want you to take away from this video is that pain and injury are so much more complex than just damage to structures and the minutiae of how you move, or like form breakdown and things like that. Especially if your form always breaks down in a really similar way, those structures are probably getting more resilient over time anyway. So like I said, like some of the things that we maybe can associate more with injury are these large spikes in load, whether it's training load or even just trying to maintain a similar amount of training while your life stresses are going crazy around that. Or like I said, there is a little bit of luck to these things as well. I think the other thing that I want people to take away is that not just back pain, but most injuries that you're going to get from lifting have a very favorable natural history. So a lot of our old understanding of how a lot of rehab treatments work has now just been replaced by they're really just entertainment or things that we don't find provocative while the body heals itself. We need to remember that just because you're experiencing back pain doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It's a perfectly normal part of the human experience, and it's not just the pain as well that makes people depressed. It's them not being able to engage with activities that give their life meaning. And so when working out, our decision-making process, once someone has hurt their back, it's about thinking about what's their relationship with pain. What are the activities in their life that they can't participate in right now? And what's our pathway back to those things, and balancing that within, trying to stay within that person's personal pain threshold as much as possible. The other thing is, you have to believe in your body's resilience and your body's ability to heal itself. And we're starting to get into the woo-woo and the placebo and things like that. But at the end of the day, the nocebo effect is the thing that you need to be worried about. Not, am I placeboing myself into getting better? You need to think about, could I potentially be getting better, but I'm noceboing myself with this unnecessary fear about the particulars of how you move, or just, am I ever going to get better? You almost need to gaslight yourself into rehabilitation. There's much more scientific explanations for what I just said. Look into John Kiley, look up the concept of allostasis, look into this biopsychosocial thing, and I'll do a whole video on the biopsychosocial model, but I want to say one thing about it after I do this set of panda pulls. So just with the biopsychosocial lens, this isn't just a lens for pain, injury, and rehabilitation. This is a lens through which you can view all aspects of training. And where people go wrong with it, they think of it as the bio, the psycho, and the social as these three separate entities, or almost like a Venn diagram where each of the circles just barely overlap. And my mentor, Jamie Smith, he put it so eloquently when he was introducing me to this model and this line of thinking. He's like, the BPS, you got to push them over each other as much as possible. And you're trying to peer through all three of them simultaneously. So because a lot of the meme interpretation of the biopsychosocial model is that we're forgetting about physical structures and we're all just turning into psychologists, whether you're a trainer or whether you're a physiotherapist. It's just about acknowledging everything that makes up the human experience, and that is your physical structures, it's your social experiences, it's your thoughts, beliefs, expectations. But we also have to acknowledge, dynamic systems theory is another good framework to get into. It's more non-linear thinking, and it's a more complex and sophisticated way of thinking about complex dynamic systems that are hard to predict. We need to find ways of embracing uncertainty without falling into the nihilistic trap of nothing matters, we're just manifesting everything. So again, it's about respecting everything that makes up the human experience, the B, the P, and the S. All right, don't be soft. Go load your back, go move your back. Sign up for a free trial of general physical preparation, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks, Jack, for suggesting a great topic.